Welcome to the show. Today I have Pascal Mathis, which is the co-founder of GetYourGuide and a wingman. We're going to go into some more details what that means in a second. So Pascal, thank you so much for being on the show.
No worries. Pleasure to be here.
Great. So let's dig right into your story. Tell us a little bit about your background, about your story, from a personal perspective, but also from an entrepreneurial perspective that got you where you are today.
So how much do I have? 10 minutes or?
10, 15 minutes, exactly.
Perfect. No, the story is not so long. So I'm an electrical engineer by training. I studied at ETH here in Zurich. And together with 4 friends, we started GetYourGuide as an evening project. I was working at Siemens at that time as a product manager. And in the evenings, we coded a little bit on our little portal. And when in 2009, we got a first financing round, then we were able to start the whole project full time. And since then, we were able to grow the company significantly. Today, it has about 400 employees. We raised 90 million in total, I guess, dollar US at the moment, and going strong. But I left the company at the end of 2013, and I joined Google as a salesperson, helping the CMOs of other big companies to work on their online strategies. And a year ago, I left Google to become a wingman, as you said. And now we only invest in startups, and we also coach startups and help founders to grow their companies.
Excellent. So let me go back a little bit into your story with GetYourGuide. Was that your first entrepreneurial venture, or was there other stuff before that?
So where we actually met, at least 2 of the co-founders of GetYourGuide was ETH Juniors. It's a junior enterprise concept, meaning next to working on our projects and studying, we had this little sort of a company, and we were 10 or 12 people, and we acquired projects from big companies, and then solved it and helped them with students working on these projects and earning quite some money. That was nice. But that was the first time when I was feeling this entrepreneurial spirit, and this is when I was hooked, and when I wanted to start my own business.
So what is it about that thing that hooked you? What hooked you about this entrepreneurial thing?
So as an engineer, basically that's probably why I became an engineer. As an engineer, you want to solve problems. And I just found it really interesting to having a group of people, which is more or less given. You can try to attract some new talent, and then you try to make, with this group, you try to make a business out of it. So you try to find the perfect problem which you want to solve, which gives you some revenues, and just to getting these mechanics all together and make it work. I found this really interesting problem solving, because it's not only smartness, like solve this equation or something, but it's also all these different people which you have to form into a team, and someone is very, very strong at sales, another person is maybe very good with numbers, so she should do the finance part. So this whole assembling and getting together the team and bringing this to a success, this is what I like so much about entrepreneurship.
I really like how you're talking about this. When you talk about it like this, it sounds like a really complex and fun game to play. Is that kind of like how you look at it, as look at entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I think I really look at this. I always thought, here's the problem, and so much money or resources you have to assemble a team, and then to try to make and find the best solution possible, and being smart about how to deal with the different problems. Yep.
Okay, perfect. Now GetYourGuide. What was the initial fire that kind of like got you into GetYourGuide? Switzerland is not really a B2C marketplace for most companies, at least. It's a large B2B marketplace when you look at what most companies do. And there's only so many people in Switzerland to reach in a B2C model. You decided to go with B2C, but you also decided to go with a very digital company. and you decided to make this a really big thing. So what was the initial trigger that got you into Get Your Guide?
I think it was naivety. We just didn't know how hard it is to build up a company which should then reach people around the globe. So we just started off and thought, since the internet is global, obviously we are not launching this for Switzerland. We are launching this for the whole world. At our very first platform we launched, one of the co-founders, Tao, he has Chinese roots. So we translated the whole platform into Chinese. And when we launched, we were fully bilingual, English and Chinese. So we were really aiming high since the very beginning. But as I said, we were quite naive and figured then out later that it's really, really hard to get market share in every different market, and every different country or culture is different, and you have to adapt. You have to adapt everything. So in the end, we did then country by country, but the vision in the beginning was global.
I think that's a key message there. I mean, you guys started with an English and a Chinese website, which I've rarely seen by now. I mean, it's just a demonstration of how big the vision actually is. And then with that big vision, instead of saying we just go global right now, actually taking it one step at a time, but always keeping that really big, massive key driving vision in front of you. I think that is the key message here. Now, I'm super curious about that journey. So if you had to point out, I know there's probably hundreds of those, but if you had to point out 3 major challenges that you faced along the way of building this company into now 400 employees, what would you say were those?
So now you asked me for 3. I will just start off with 1, and then maybe I can remember a second one. So one of the most difficult one was culture for us. So we grew really, really fast. So we were 5 founders. And by 2013, we were 120 people. And just to keep and we had 3 locations. So we had one office in Zurich, one we established in Berlin pretty early on. Again, our vision was big. And we also opened one in the US. And the interesting thing was, so long as we were like 12 people in Zurich, 5 of them were founders, culture was not an issue. Basically, all the other people, they behaved like founders in our eyes. And so we thought that's pretty easy. Then one of the founders went to Berlin, tried to set up the new company, the new office, and he did. And guess what? When we hired 15 people, only one of them a founder, we had a very, very strange culture, which was not at all as we had envisioned it. And to keep this culture and to shape this culture was really a big challenge for us. And how we addressed it, we then figured out we have to write down our values, what we believe in and what we stand for. And this helped us a great deal also with the whole recruiting process. So whenever we hired somebody for the company, we were not only looking at the skills they brought in about social media or whatever, but we also looked at, does she or he bring and have the same values as we have defined them for our culture. And if there wasn't a culture fit, we would just not hire him or her.
That's a really interesting lesson learned, because kind of like what you did is, because hiring and culture is such a complex thing that most of us don't really understand. We can't put it really on paper. Like, what is it really? How exactly does it work? How do people work with each other? It's such a complex thing. So what you decided to do is not make the complex more complicated, but actually say, let's make this simple. Let's drill it down into principles and look at these principles, the values, and then figure out where's the alignment in those values with the culture, with the company, and the people who come into the company to have like that 8% probability that things are going to work out really well, and then the rest can be learned. It's sort of like that approach, right?
Yeah, and we tried to do it that way, exactly how you described it. What was really interesting for me to see is, although we had exactly the same values in all the different offices, we had 3 cultures. We had a Zurich culture, we had a Berlin culture, and we had a culture for the Las Vegas team. So every subculture, so to speak, developed on its own. That was really, really interesting to see for me as a head of HR.
And that's also an interesting point, because it's easy to run into this thinking that there has to be one culture. There has to be just one way of doing things, and then trying to control this from an HR perspective, from a CEO perspective. But kind of like what you said is, well, it was really powerful to actually let these cultures flourish by themselves in their own ways, as long as they're underneath that same umbrella of the values. And instead of trying to control them, let them basically flourish and thrive.
Now, in my opinion, you can't force them into a specific culture. Interestingly enough, every new member in a group, well, if the group is very big, then maybe not so much. But if it's 20 people, every new member can change the culture a little bit. So our approach then in the end was just, we had to live by our values. And as a founder, you have to be really, really good about this, because every eye is staring at you and looking exactly whom you speak to, how you speak to them. So in the end, we just had to make sure that we stick to our rules and values, and then hope that the others would follow. So that was our approach.
I love that. That's perfect. So this is a great topic. Company culture is such a big thing that, well, both parties struggle with, the corporates big times, but also the entrepreneurs. So this is great. So tell me about the second challenge.
So now I'm really into HR topics. So the next biggest thing would be hiring, but we touched this a little bit. Maybe then the next one I would say is when do you have to be stubborn and when do you adapt? So it's so hard also to coach now when we work with entrepreneurs and founders. So a good founder has a vision and is very strict. So he or she only follows and tries to go there, and is very stubborn. So they wouldn't change and wouldn't adapt their plan. But sometimes you have to be flexible. And this is really so hard to explain. When is the time that I have to change the plan, and when should I be stubborn? So for me, this is the where it makes the whole decision if a leader is successful or not, because he has to be a very good decision maker, and often he has to be stubborn. But sometimes when he has the feedback like 10 times, maybe he should think about changing it slightly. So it's hard. I don't know how you call this, stick this together in a topic, but when to take a decision and when to change plans, that would be really crucial point in entrepreneurship.
Yeah, this is a really, really good point. It kind of like goes into the direction of the first thing you shared with the values, because I think what you're saying is that stick with your vision always. That really doesn't change in terms of, but vision is a word different people use for different things, but vision is that really big picture, that end thing that's not even tangible most of the time. Like, what is the absolute end thing in 50 years from today? That's sort of the vision, right? If we say that's the vision, that's not really going to change. Neither are the values. But the market may change, the product may change, everything else may completely change, and that's pretty much okay as long as it's in alignment with that vision and with that values, and it kind of like helps that it works.
But this is exactly the hard part, because I see founders, they change their business model every half a year, and this is not healthy. So we changed our business model as well. So in the beginning, we were peer-to-peer. We were more or less a student platform. So if somebody goes to San Francisco, a student or a young person would show them around. If they would come to Bern or Zurich, we would show them around. So that was the initial plan. And it took us really a lot of effort to say, okay, no, this didn't work. Let's pivot. And now we're doing the B2C thing. Let's go to the professional tour and activity providers and help them distribute their products online. That was, for us, it was a huge shift, and it took us half a year or more in development. We had to rebuild the whole platform and onboard all these different suppliers. That was a huge effort, but we did this once in a span of almost 10 years now.
Yeah, that's a good message. Like, don't change your business model every half year, but stick with something, and if it works, go down that route as long as it's aligned. And then if you kind of like really see, okay, there's something that needs to change it, but then don't just change it in a heartbeat and just say, okay, let's go with this now, but change it in a conscious way.
Yeah, exactly. But this is exactly the part which I'm struggling to explain. But this is exactly what I mean. So if we wouldn't have changed, there Get Your Guide wouldn't exist today. If we would have changed, if the second version within in the end turned out to work, but after half a year, guess what? It didn't really look very cool. So we could have turned it down or changed it again. But then we were right that we stick to the business model and we tried to make it work because we somehow knew it should somehow we should make this be able to making this work.
I love that. I love that. So this is very, very powerful. Once again, what's the third challenge?
Third challenge. I didn't want to speak about it, but raising funds. This is just to go out to the investors, figuring out how this investor world works, and then sell you really well and try to strike a deal. That was tough, and we had some really great learnings there on the way.
Okay. So this is a good one. I kind of like want to go into the HR thing again, because I think we kind of skipped that, hiring talent, because it kind of like goes in a similar direction like the first one about culture, but I think it's still a separate topic from actual culture. It's sort of like the before people join.
Yeah.
So
how to get the talent on the bus. Yeah.
Exactly, because like you know Pascal Kaufman really well, right? I talked to him about this, and well, you know, it's kind of like with them, it was topic about like why should somebody join them instead of Google, right? For example. And he had a really interesting perspective on that as well, in terms of philosophy, in terms of values. So that's why I want to go there, because you mentioned that already. So tell me a bit about that. I mean, there's talent out there, and as a young company sometimes, or even as a bigger company, sometimes it's really hard to just buy them out of the market, right? So what do you do instead?
Yeah. So, and it's a good question for me since I worked at Google, and when I was at GetYourGuide, we also fought against Google because they wanted to grab the best engineers right away from university. And yeah, if you have these mindsets or people with the mindset that they want to go to the market leader or to a big brand, you have no chance anyway. But there is also the people who want to be responsible for a big part of the product. So obviously at Google, you also are responsible for millions or even billions of users, but only of a fraction of a product often. So at GetYourGuide, you could be responsible for let's say for the backend, for the tour suppliers, which is a huge thing for our business. If you fuck this up, then we are out of business basically. So if you are looking for this entrepreneurial spirit and entrepreneurial minded people, then you have a really good chance to get them on board.
Yeah, so kind of like the message that I heard there from you is, if you want to get people on board with your company, make sure you get those on board that are in alignment with that. You know, don't try to buy out people from Microsoft or Google if they want to just work with a bigger company. I mean, that's totally fine. Like, everybody's free in today's world, or most people are free in today's world. So, I mean, what's the point? Like, so kind of like, it's more about getting them where they are today. If they want to be more entrepreneurial, they may not be a founder, right? It may not be their thing, but they may want to work with founders, and that may be their biggest joy and their biggest drive. So that's the goal, right?
And a lot of people I meet, they don't really want to do this very first initial step, which is really hard. Assemble the first few people, found the company, try to build a functionally working prototype or something, and then trying to bring this into the market. I mean, this is just very, very hard and almost gambling. So, but there is a lot of people who like this entrepreneurial spirit, but they want to join something which seems to work. So let's put it that way. And these people you have to find. And then the other point, which I often see, is founders think it's wrong to spend too much time hiring people. And they don't just spend enough time, in my opinion. And I mean, we did exactly the same mistake as well. So we then, when we were 40 or 50 people, we stopped the rule that a founder would have to interview every new employee. And after half a year, we had a total mess, because the people we hired, they didn't hire other people which we would have led into the company. So after half a year, we went back and said we won't hire anybody before we had a founder interview. So it's just what I tell the startups these days is that it's totally fine to invest a big chunk of their time to find the best people working for the company. As an investor, I basically look a little bit at the market and the product and the solution, etc. But I mainly look for the team, and if they are able to assemble a very good team, then I'm almost investing already.
This is great because it kind of like goes into scaling, you know, because when we talk about scaling, usually we just talk about external scaling, you know, markets and customers and things like that. But how do you scale recruitment internally? If, you know, because when you get to a certain size, it may actually make sense to no longer be in there as the founder in the process. But then you need to do what you talked about before, which is about the values, which is about having those really core, powerful, strong values very clearly somewhere, so that other people who understand that and embody this can actually follow that with the new hires and things like that. That's a really interesting topic.
I would actually go the other path. I would even I would hire everybody for specific topics, but not for hiring. For me, it's totally fine if the CEO spends 60 to 80% just finding the best people to work for him and doing all this other stuff which has to be done in the company. But I just haven't seen many HR or recruitment or something specialists who would bring this founding vision and founding personality to also. It's not only hiring, but this is the other part we talked about. It's also selling the company to a new employee, and almost nobody can do this better than the founder himself. So I wouldn't shift hiring from the founders.
I like that perspective. Perfect. Thanks for sharing that. So let's go a little bit into your present. So what's up today? Tell me a bit about Wingman, and also kind of like what's going on. So you're an investor now, you're a Wingman, you're working with startups in different capacities. What's up?
Yeah, since about 3 years, I accidentally turned out to be a business angel. I didn't even know if I would be a good business angel or if I would enjoy it. But this is the case, or at least the second is the case. I enjoy doing it. So the young generation of founders, they just reached out to me and asked me, so how did you raise funds? How did you open up this office in Vegas, etc., etc.? And then you start helping them a little bit. Of course, it's very interesting because you remember how tough these times were, and you are a little bit on the back seat of the car, and from time to time they update you, and then someone they are at the point that they need to raise another round of financing, and then obviously they know that you have a little bit of cash in the bank, and they want to make you a investor. And I invested into 15 companies, I think, by now, and try to help these founders along their path with ideas and feedback and negotiations, etc., etc.
So how do you pick? I mean, do you just pick the industries that you know from your past? Do you pick completely new industries that you've never been in? Do you don't care about the industry actually, or do you just care about the team? Like, how do you make those decisions?
To be very honest, I don't even pick. It's just a passive influx which comes to me through my network. So in the beginning, I thought I could only maybe invest in something which has to do with the internet, where I can share a bit of know-how. What I learned is, though, that most often they don't have a problem with the product or not too much, or the core technology, because that's where the founders are coming from. Often there are some very well-educated engineers. They can do the products part much better than I could. But what they struggle with is all the part we were talking about on like growing a company from 5 to some hundreds people. So this is the part where I come in, where I help them with some legal stuff, with financing rounds often is an issue. Then the culture stuff we were talking about. So all these, or sometimes they have a problem between the founders or something. This is when a Wingman can step in and can help.
By the way, I love the description. Like, it's such a great way of talking about it. You know, wingman. I think it's brilliant. It's not because there's lots of descriptions about what this is in a corporate way. You know, but I think it fits perfectly for the startup community.
Yeah, we always make like Lucas, my wingman. he we make always the joke. It's just actually the thing works really well. It's like the startup it's in its own plane, and we are next to them. So we are not in the same plane. We just try to help them not getting shot from behind, and maybe some tactics where we want to fly next. So I think it works. Then the startups after the second workshop or so, they understand what we mean by being their wingman.
So this is great. Thanks for diving into that. Totally agree. So let's talk a little bit about the future now. I'd like to talk about two things about your experience with Get Your Guide from a B2C perspective, but also from an industry perspective in terms of what's going on in digitalization. Where do you see the industry is kind of going in terms of digitalization there, and also in terms of Switzerland, because you're now investing in lots and lots of companies in Switzerland, so you get a good sense and feel of the market of what's going on. So let's start with Get Your Guide. Where do you see that industry? I mean, first of all, you've seen it where it's coming from, where it's coming from, basically. So what are some of the biggest changes that you've seen over the past 10 years or so, and where do you think it's going to be 10 years from today?
So we were right at that step where people started to book all their travel parts online. So for flight and hotels, it was already done, and that's why we came to the party and said, hey, why does it stop there? Why can't we book our tours and activities, attractions also on the internet? This is basically where we came from. We just didn't understand, and 10 years later, we were right. People also want to book these kind of tours, attractions online, and yeah, maybe also, yeah, it's a very good question where it is in 10 years. I'm not even sure if 100% of the bookings, etc., will be online. So the interpersonal relationship, etc., is still very strong. So I would even argue it's not 100% done through online channels. I think for a certain kind of people, also people who have a bit more money and less time since they work hard, etc. Maybe they want to have offline services of somebody picking for them, or of somebody who has been there at a certain location and just telling them what to do. So yeah, hard to me to predict.
So let's maybe, I'm just challenging you now. Let's maybe take a step further. So there's offline and online, right? But when I'm thinking about it as well, I'm maybe I'm a bit crazy, but I'm thinking like, if virtual reality is at some point as real as when I look out a window, will I be, for some parts of my travels, just be sitting at home with, maybe not the clunky thing, right? But with something that is much, much more natural, and just go through it because of the experience? Will I be surfing in Costa Rica over lunch with my VR thing, or in my VR room or something like that? And augmented reality is another piece. And also when it comes to like AI, for example, right? AI is such a huge thing. Like everybody talks about AI. Like now, the suggestions for Amazon is a good example, right? I get pretty good suggestions from Amazon on what I want to buy and stuff like that. But I think there's so much more in the future we can do with AI, with machine learning. And like, for example, when I pick up my iPhone, it knows when I actually want to do something with it, or I just want to pick it up. The screen stays black, or it goes on. So stuff like that, and it learns my patterns. And in travel, I mean, do you think we're going to be at a point where it's just going to be so customized in terms of we don't even have to go too much into planning? When, okay, I want to fly from here to there, and then I will book a hotel and a car, but it's just based on all the patterns and everything that it knows and learns about me. It just goes like, here's your schedule.
Yeah, maybe you picked the wrong one for these questions. I knew you would come up with virtual reality, and maybe 50 years we have all of this stuff. I have just worked too long maybe in the travel industry, and I've worked with very big travel clients also at Google. and I have just seen how slow everything is and how difficult it is to get all these moving parts together. So yeah, I would not be too excited about the changes in the next 5-10 years. I think it would stay more or less the same. Obviously, virtual reality is really cool, but I think more of it as inspirational tool. I still think that it can't replace the real experience at the location. So I would think this is a very good dreaming phase, excitement phase tool. So find out about Costa Rica first, and then you travel there as inspiration. But I'm not too much. I have just seen how slow everything reacts, and you mentioned Amazon, how smart this is. But at so many websites, etc., I'm thinking, man, this website doesn't really understand who I am. Why do I get these strange boots, which I would never buy? So yeah, I know everybody's talking AI, and I'm an electrical engineer, but I just think it takes a little bit longer than we all expect and dream.
Absolutely. This is really interesting perspective from somebody who's really deep in the industry, because it's always interesting to talk to people who are actually in the industry. Like there's like Pascal Kaufman just shared an article a couple of days ago or something like that. Or he talked about this at the ETH speech that he done about like most artificial intelligence. The doomers, the ones that say it's gonna doom, they're not actually in AI.
Okay.
It's kind of like, so it's really interesting for me also to talk about people who are actually in that thing. It's a bit like the same when you talk to people who are just consultants and they don't really do anything real.
That's exactly a little bit my feeling. And as an investor, at how many pitch decks I see this AI or machine learning, etc. And if you then go very, very deep into the company, obviously they wouldn't tell you right at the beginning, but after a couple of months of coaching, then you figure out the AI is just not really the AI. At the moment, it's very manual, and a very basic algorithm is just doing the whole thing, and they just have the AI tag or label on it. So I'm just a little bit reluctant. Obviously, I mean, Google Photos, etc. They do some amazing stuff, but they invested like 15 years to get to this point. I'm just, yeah, hopefully I'm wrong, and it will all be much faster, but I'm just a bit hesitant.
Okay, so let's talk about Switzerland. We talked about this in a previous conversation a little bit, and I'm really curious about hearing your perspective. Switzerland and innovation, Switzerland and entrepreneurship. Where do you see like the state of the art today? I mean, you're very deep into that field yourself, and you see very deep into that field. So where do you see it compared to maybe some other innovation hubs around the world? And also, where do you think entrepreneurship is going here in Switzerland, and where it should be going in the next 5-10 years?
Yeah, talking innovation, I think we are at a very great spot with ÖPFL in Lausanne and ETH in Zurich. And what we see, Lucas and myself, what we see, like the ideas and technologies coming out, and the founders' potential is amazing. So I think, yeah, we are very lucky to having these organizations in the country and really bring technology forward. So in many hotspots, I'm not mentioning any cities, but in many hotspots we have cool ideas and cool businesses, but technology-wise, most often it's not like bleeding edge or something totally new. And I think out of these universities here in Zurich and Lausanne, there is some real crazy technology coming out, which is actually new and which can define new areas or making really a huge step.
Okay.
So the other point was entrepreneurship, I guess.
Yes.
There, I think it changed to the better. So when we founded GetYourGuide, entrepreneurship was not even a career track or a career track, I have to say. So building your own startup was not a way of do like that. That wasn't the idea. Doing it in the first year after you graduate. So normally you go to a consultant or a bank or you go to ABB as an engineer. But nowadays I speak often to the entrepreneur club at ETH, and I think they do a really good job. And nowadays it is a career option for some of the students to try and build their own company, which I think is great. And the only thing, and the Swiss people, we have this, we are a bit not too much risk taker. So I think since we have these very nice jobs left and right, so to really choose the hard option, let me put it that way, and to try to do your own thing is not so, like not too many people have this bug so far, and I hope that this will change. And also on the investment side, the same risk is not being taken. So I see many investors, they look at many cases, but nobody wants to be the first, for instance, to then invest really in a company. They all wait until the few lead investors are joining, and then maybe they do a small ticket and also co-invest. But I would love to have, since we have so much money in Switzerland, it's amazing. There is really a lot of wealthy people, and I would love if some of them could change their mind a little bit and start to take some risk, and also if they lose the money. But it's so cool to help these entrepreneurs trying to get this idea into the market, come up with a really nice product and get some decent revenues. And I think if we could work a little bit on this whole risk-taking part in Switzerland, that would help a great deal.
Now, this is a great topic. So you're one of the few investors in Switzerland I know who invest in early stage companies. I know plenty who go like, well, we do 20 to 40 million companies, in revenue, and that's it, right? So what do you think is required in Switzerland, in a country that is really very much safety driven as a culture, basically? What do you think is required here for the wealthy individuals, maybe VCs? I don't know if there's not a big scene in Switzerland in terms of VC, but just in terms of investors in general. What do you think is required for them to make that leap to say, okay, let's change that?
It's tough. I mean, they have run their own companies, and they are obviously familiar with balance sheets, and balance sheets of a startups, they look horrible to a normal person or investor. It's just a total no-go. And that's actually a really tricky question on how to educate them. This is what we do at Wingman sometimes, or sometimes business angels or like investors who want to do their first deal at the seed stage. They come to us and come with the whole pitch deck, etc., and ask us for a second opinion, and then we have to tell them that it's okay. They plan this hockey stick, and obviously 10 out of or 9 out of 10 they will never achieve this, but this is just how we dream about it, and maybe if you can open then this door, then maybe we can achieve it, etc., etc. So we are educating them, but it takes a lot of time. And yeah, it's a really good question, and I haven't found the answer, but just talking to them repeatedly, often, and then when they do their first 2-3 investments, they figure out that it's so cool to and that they learn a great deal from the founders and with the founders, because they try to figure out which strategy is the best. Then 3 months later, you figured out if this was working out or not. So it's not only the money you invest and maybe you get something back or not. It's a lot of fun to work with the founders, and you also learn a great deal because you're so close to the business.
Now, this is interesting, because most investors, at least most investors I know, they are entrepreneurs themselves. That's how they became wealthy, right? So what do you think? I mean, so they are entrepreneurs themselves. Now, investing in entrepreneurs is sort of like investing in themselves, just earlier, right? So what do you think is different? Do you think it's such a huge generational gap? It's such a huge difference in terms of how the world is run that they don't even recognize themselves anymore in those young entrepreneurs? Or what do you think it is?
I think most often, like in the older days, there weren't these very rapid growth cases. So you started with your little factory, and then you enlarged it a little bit, and then maybe you went to Germany, sold some products there, and then maybe to France, etc. And so nowadays with the internet, etc., you can do this at a much faster pace, and this is what they struggle with. because the founders, they dream of the whole world, and the entrepreneurs know how long it took them to get Switzerland and maybe a part of Germany and a little bit of France. So they just think this is impossible. But with an online service, obviously it is possible. So it's maybe we have to wait for this generation which did their businesses and successes with online and these faster technologies. And these guys, they would understand or have a better or an easier view on these pitch decks and balance sheets of the today founders.
Absolutely, that's a really good point. Maybe we should open a school, that teaches the older generation of entrepreneurs and investors about digital.
We thought about this. Maybe you see soon a section on the Wingman website where it is for investors, and maybe we do a small class or something. We actually thought about it. If people apply for it, then we are going to offer something like this.
Looking forward to that. Excellent. So one last question about Wingman, specifically about your activities. So I'm always kind of like looking, for the people who watch this and for the community and everything to make certain connections. So this is always a spot where people say, well, if I had access to this, if I had access to that, it will make, the growth, it will make this and this much easier, much faster. Is there something that you'd say, well, if I had access to this or that, it could be anything from best practices to skills to networks to whatever it may be, that will make the growth and the progression of Wingman and your impact faster, easier, more scalable?
So we work with startups and we work with fellow investors, and both of these stakeholders are very welcome. Cool startups, or just give us a ring, call us up, and we have a coffee together, and we're always interested to learn and hear from them. And the same is true for the investors. If we are like, the more the merrier. If we have more investor connections in Switzerland, we can help the startups match with the investors, and we have more cases which are being funded, and hopefully we have a really big case soon coming out of Switzerland.
I love that. So follow up to that, where can people connect, find you, learn more about Wingman?
It's wingman.ch.
Okay, so that's the main thing. That's the main place to go. Perfect. Yep. We're going to link to that below. So really appreciate it. Thank you so much for being here, Pascal, for sharing your insights, your story, and it was very inspiring.
It was a pleasure. Have a good day.